You would think that after 32 years of marriage, after changing his mother's diapers when no one else would, after giving up every last piece of myself to belong, they'd at least let me finish my coffee. But no, not even that. Your things are in the garage. I had Miguel box them up yesterday. That was the first thing his sister said to me the morning after the funeral. Not a "how are you holding up?" Not a "thank you for everything." Just that. The eggs were still hot on the buffet tray. The ham hadn't even been touched. Yet there I stood in the middle of the kitchen, clutching the mug that said, "Best wife since '91, while she shoved a foil pan into the oven like she owned the place. She did that thing, that cold, crisp motion where she wiped her hands on a towel she didn't even buy, then smiled at me like I was a stranger who'd overstayed her welcome. "This house was always meant to stay in the family," she added with syrupy calm. "And, well, you were Rick's wife. Were. I hope you understand." I didn't say a word. I couldn't, because my throat had closed up and my hands were shaking so hard I had to put the mug down before I dropped it. I looked around. No one met my eyes. His mother, the woman I'd bathed, fed, and cried with for years, was sipping coffee across the counter, her lipstick staining the rim of my favorite cup. His cousin Eddie was laughing too loud in the living room, as if the man we'd just buried hadn't left behind a wife still wearing her mourning black. As if I wasn't standing there in the same kitchen where I'd baked birthday cakes and stood crying into the sink the night Rick told me his cancer had come back. And then came the final blow. The one that told me, clear as day, that I had never belonged. Not really. His other sister, Denise, poked her head in from the hallway and chirped, "Hey! Don't forget to leave the key on the counter when you go. That one still opens the back door." She winked. Like this was all a joke. Like shoving me out of the only home I'd known for over 3 decades was some cheeky prank at my expense. I felt my ears ringing. The kitchen blurred around the edges. My breath came short, like I'd been punched in the gut by a memory too big to swallow. And still, I said nothing. Because what do you say when your husband's family, the people you served, protected, and loved like your own blood, strip you down to nothing with a smile? I turned, slowly, trying to hold the edges of my dignity together with shaking fingers. But before I could step out, someone touched my wrist. It was a quiet touch. Gentle. Ellie, Rick's cousin, the youngest. The one who used to sleep over when her parents fought and call me Auntie Meg, even when others didn't. Her voice came in a whisper. "Aunt Meg, are they really kicking you out? Just like that?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She saw it in my eyes. In the silence. And what she said next, low, almost to herself, would follow me long after I walked out that door. "They don't deserve you, but I think you deserve to show them who you really are." I was 8 years old the day my world ended. One moment I was holding my mother's hand on the way home from church. The next I was waking up in a hospital bed with 2 broken ribs, glass in my scalp, and a nurse whispering, "Sweetheart, your parents didn't make it." There was no extended family, no aunt to take me in, no cousin to hug me tight, just a foster system that shuffled me from one cold hallway to another. I remember eating dinner with strangers who barely remembered my name. I remember birthdays with no candles, holidays with no tree, and silence, the kind that makes you forget what it feels like to be wanted. So by the time I met Rick in college, I clung to him like breath. He was warm, funny in a quiet way, and steady. He didn't come with flowers or grand gestures, but he showed up. Every time. When I got sick with bronchitis and couldn't afford the meds, he rode a city bus 2 hours each way to borrow money from his uncle. When I bombed my midterms and cried on the dorm steps, he just sat with me in the dark, rubbing circles into my back until my shoulders stopped shaking. I didn't fall in love with Rick all at once. I chose him because he made me feel like I belonged. For the first time since that crash. And when we got married, I didn't just say yes to him. I said yes to his family. His mother, Judy, hugged me at our engagement party and said, "I'm so glad Rick finally found someone who's not afraid of hard work." His sister Beth let me borrow her pearls for the wedding. Even Denise, who barely smiled at anyone, clinked her champagne glass against mine and said, "You'll do just fine." I believed them, so I tried. harder than anyone should have to. When Rick's dad passed suddenly from a stroke, I was the one who handled the paperwork. While everyone else cried or froze, I sorted bank accounts, called the lawyer, arranged the funeral. When Judy's hip fractured that winter and the sisters couldn't manage due to work and the kids, I moved into the guest room with her. For 6 straight months, I woke up at 3 a.m. to help her to the bathroom. I ground her meds into applesauce and rubbed lotion into her swollen ankles. Rick told them all, "Meg's holding this whole house together." And still, when the holidays came, I was always the one behind the camera, not in the frame. They never said it directly, but I felt it, that I was the help, the outsider who made herself useful, the one you tolerate because she keeps the wheels turning. When Rick got sick, really sick, it was like my world folded in half again. He was only 56, healthy, athletic, never smoked, but the cancer came fast. Stage 4 before we even saw it coming. I stopped working to care for him. I spent every dollar of my retirement savings on supplements, specialists, anything that might buy us more time. He hated seeing me worry, hated feeling like a burden. So I smiled through it, hid the bills, sold my car without telling him. And his family? They visited at first. But when things got harder, when Rick started to lose weight, started to forget names, started to scream at night from the pain, they visited less. They'd bring casseroles and leave within 15 minutes. Beth would make jokes about not wanting to remember him like this. Denise called it too sad. Judy stayed upstairs more and more, claiming her nerves couldn't take it. So I stayed. I stayed until the last breath. And in the days after he passed, while I handled the obituary and the funeral and the legal notifications, I found a small notebook in Rick's bedside drawer. It was leather-bound, worn soft from use. Inside, he'd scribbled messages, half-thoughts, fears. Love notes he never gave me. One entry read, "If anything happens to me, I hope Meg doesn't let them crush her spirit. She deserves better than what she's put up with." Another said, "She built this house. Even if it was in my name, it's hers." I clutched that notebook like a lifeline. Not because it gave me rights, but because it gave me proof that he saw me, that I wasn't imagining it all, that he knew. The night before the funeral, I showed Ellie the notebook. She read a few pages, then looked up with eyes glassy from tears. She didn't say much, just reached out and held my hand. That same hand she held again, the day after the funeral, in the kitchen, when her cousins tried to erase me like chalk on a sidewalk. It wasn't just about the house. It was the feeling I had as a child, all over again. Being told, gently, smilingly, that I didn't belong. That no matter what I gave, what I did, what I carried, I would never be enough. Only this time, I wasn't a little girl with glass in her hair and no one to call. This time, I had earned every corner of that home, and this time, I wasn't walking away with nothing. The first slap wasn't with a hand. It came in the form of an email. I had just gotten back from Ellie's, where I'd been sleeping on her couch for 4 nights. My back sore, my eyes raw from crying into borrowed pillows. I returned to the house in the early morning, hoping to grab the rest of my things before anyone else was home. But when I tried my key in the door, it didn't turn. At first, I thought I was just tired. Maybe I had the wrong key. But no. I had used this key for 32 years. I knew the way the metal caught slightly when turned to the left. I knew the sound of the deadbolt sliding, and yet it wouldn't budge. I knocked, no answer. I walked around the back, only to find a brand new security keypad installed beside the doorframe, and then my phone buzzed. From Denise Harper. Subject, transition of property use. Not even my name, not even a greeting. Just a paragraph, cold and clipped, informing me that, pending the family's collective agreement, I would no longer be allowed access to the home due to safety concerns and potential liability. They called me a liability. I stood in that backyard where I used to grow sunflowers, where Rick once built me a crooked little bench out of old porch wood, and felt something twist inside me, a click, quiet, but final. I didn't cry. I didn't knock again. I walked away. But later that week I returned. Not for revenge, not yet, just for answers. Beth was hosting a family meeting in the living room. Judy, Denise, and a few of the cousins were there, sipping wine and flipping through real estate brochures. I stood just outside the open sliding door, unseen at first, and I listened. "We've got interest from 2 buyers," Beth was saying, swirling her wine like it meant something. "One's an investor from Connecticut, wants to turn it into an Airbnb." "Rick would have hated that," Ellie muttered. Her voice was low, disgusted. Beth laughed. "Rick's gone, and Meg was never really part of the decision-making. We tolerated her because he loved her, but let's be honest, she was always a bit overattached. Overattached. To the husband she held through chemo. To the house she cleaned, repaired, and slept alone in while they lived their own lives." I pushed the door open then. Slow. Controlled. The room froze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. I simply said, "Am I interrupting your business meeting? Or should I pour myself a glass too?" Denise stood quickly, as if trying to block me from entering. "You need to leave," she snapped. "This isn't your home anymore." I looked around at the faces, familiar, yet now strangers. People I had cooked for, tended to, cried with, celebrated. And I said, "You're right. This may not be my home anymore, but it was my life. And I will not let you erase me from it like I was just a guest." Beth scoffed, setting her glass down. "You never owned the house, Meg. It was Rick's name on the deed. You should have prepared better. That's not our fault." It wasn't the words that broke me. It was the look in her eyes, that smug certainty, the assumption that I'd go quietly, that I'd fold like a paper napkin. But I didn't. Because that morning, I had received a letter. Rick's attorney, the one they didn't know I had spoken to months before his death, had reached out. Apparently, Rick had drafted something they were unaware of, something I hadn't even seen yet. But I didn't mention that now. Not yet. Instead, I took a long, slow breath, looked Beth square in the eye, and said, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. And the worst part? You won't even see it coming." I turned and walked out, leaving the wine untouched and the air heavy behind me. Later that week, I received the second slap, the crueler one. I visited the cemetery alone on a rainy Wednesday. I brought fresh roses, yellow, Rick's favorite. As I knelt by the stone, my umbrella balanced against my shoulder, I noticed something strange. The small bronze plaque I'd ordered, the one that read, "Beloved husband, forever loved by Meg," was gone. In its place was a new one, "Beloved son, cherished brother." No mention of me, not even once. I called the cemetery office. They said the family had requested a revision. Since I was not listed as next of kin on the burial contract, they had to comply. My hands were shaking again, but not from sadness this time, from rage, from the realization that this family, whom I had poured everything into, wasn't just cutting me out of the house. They were trying to erase me from Rick's entire legacy. And yet, even then, I didn't scream. I didn't fight back, not yet. I went home to Ellie's, the only place I still felt seen, and sat at the kitchen table in silence. She made me tea, no words, just her hand resting lightly over mine. Then she whispered, "Meg, I think it's time. You remember what Rick left you? In the envelope." I looked at her, confused. "What envelope?" Her eyes narrowed, a quiet flash of certainty in them. "The one he gave me the week before he died. The one he told me to give you only after they turned on you." And just like that, the twist began to take root. But I didn't smile. Not yet. Because when justice comes, it should not shout. It should walk in on quiet feet and watch the ones who threw you out start to tremble. I didn't open the envelope for 3 days. Not because I was afraid of what was inside, but because I already knew. Somewhere deep in my bones, I had always known Rick had tried to protect me in the only way he could. Quietly, thoughtfully, without fanfare, just like he lived. The envelope was cream-colored, sealed with a piece of medical tape, the kind nurses use for IV lines. His handwriting, slightly shakier than I remembered, was scrawled across the front. "Only if they turn on her." It felt like a whisper from the grave. Inside was a letter, 2 pages, and a small black USB stick. No explanation. Just a sticky note with 3 words. "Play this first." I borrowed Ellie's laptop, the one she used for school. We sat at the table side by side. She reached for my hand before I clicked play. And then there it was, Rick's voice, rougher than I remembered, slower. You could hear the strain in his breath. But it was him. If you're watching this, Meg, I'm so sorry. I tried to tell them, tried to reason, but they just didn't listen, and I didn't want you to carry the weight. I didn't blink. I couldn't. This house, it should have always been yours. Even if the deed wasn't in your name, I only left it that way because we didn't think it mattered. We thought we had time to fix it. Ellie covered her mouth. So I made this recording, and I left instructions with Stephen at the firm. He has the paperwork, the asset transfer, the notarized witness statements. I want you to fight, Meg, not for the house, but for your dignity. His voice cracked. You carried my family when they didn't even know it. You deserve better than how they're about to treat you. The video ended, just like that. No dramatic music, no flashing lights, just truth. Raw, simple, final. Ellie looked at me, tears rimming her eyes. You need to show them this. I nodded slowly, but not yet. Because justice, real justice, should be unshakable when it lands. And the following Sunday, the family held a celebration of life gathering at the country club. Not a somber memorial, not a quiet family luncheon, a catered event with speeches, toasts, a slideshow, and centerpieces that probably cost more than Rick's first car. I wasn't invited, not officially, but I showed up anyway. I wore navy. Rick always said it brought out my eyes. I didn't wear makeup, just a pair of simple earrings he gave me for our 20th anniversary, the last gift he wrapped himself. I entered through the back terrace, unnoticed at first. Beth was up front with a microphone, delivering a speech about family legacy and how Rick always loved having everyone around. People clapped politely, some dabbed at tears. Judy sat front row, chin lifted like a queen presiding over a well-curated funeral. Then the slideshow started. Photos of Rick playing baseball, Rick holding his nieces, Rick on vacation with his sisters. Not one picture of me, not one. And that's when I stepped forward, not to the stage, not to the mic. I walked to the AV table, where a tech guy in a headset was controlling the slides. I handed him a USB drive. Rick Harper's last message, I said quietly. He paused, blinked. I'm his wife. And then I looked at him the way you look at someone who's about to witness truth, and said, just press play. The screen went black, and then his voice filled the room. If you're watching this, that means you did it. You pushed Meg out. Heads turned. Confusion rippled across the rows like wind through tall grass. I didn't move. I just stood in the back, hands calmly folded, letting the silence speak before he did again. To those of you who think she didn't belong, let me remind you what she carried. A photo faded in. Me sitting on the floor next to his hospital bed, holding a bowl of soup and smiling. Not posed, not edited, just real. She carried my mother when you all were too busy. She paid the taxes on this house 3 years in a row when I couldn't work. She gave up her job to care for me. She was the home. Judy lowered her glass slowly. Denise leaned forward in her seat, blinking like the video might change if she stared hard enough. Beth was frozen, and then the bomb dropped. Legally, I've arranged for Meg to inherit the house. The documentation is filed with Stephen Foster, my attorney. It supersedes any claim or assumption made by family. Yes, it was in my name, but that's just paperwork. The spirit of that home, that was hers. Murmurs started. I know some of you won't like this. That's fine. I didn't record this to please you. I recorded it to protect the only person who ever protected me when no one else would. Silence. Meg, if you're here, I want you to know. I see you. I always did. I'm sorry I waited this long to say it in front of everyone else. And then the screen went black again. Not a fade out, just a quiet, deliberate cut. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Then came the shuffle of feet, the stiff shifting of people who had just realized the ground beneath them wasn't what they thought it was. and right on cue, as if this were some perfectly timed play, the doors opened. Stephen Foster, Rick's attorney, walked in holding a manila folder. He looked directly at Judy. "Mrs. Harper, you and I spoke years ago, remember?" She nodded slowly, pale. "Your son asked me to deliver this once the video was played publicly." He opened the folder. "These are the signed asset transfer forms, witnessed, notarized, filed 6 weeks before Mr. Harper passed. This document grants full ownership of the property at 472 Baywood Drive to Margaret Harper, effective immediately upon his death." Beth shot to her feet. "This is a private family event. You can't just—" Stephen raised a brow. "I'm simply executing my client's final instructions. In fact," he pulled out a second document. "You're going to want to read this, too." He handed it to Judy. Her hand trembled as she took it. A letter, handwritten. I knew that script. I'd seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, get-well notes on the fridge. She read the first line and turned gray. Then slowly, she handed it to Beth, who handed it to Denise, who sank back into her chair with a face like wet concrete. I didn't need to read it. I already knew what it said. Rick had asked them, begged them, to take care of me, not to fight over things, to honor what he built with me, not dismantle it out of ego and entitlement. And they ignored him. Ellie stood from the second row. Her voice was soft, but it carried. "You all treated her like she was temporary, like she was disposable. But she was the only permanent thing Rick ever had." She walked to where I was standing and gently linked her arm through mine. "She's not leaving through the back door anymore." Later, I stood on the country club's front steps as people trickled out. Slower now, quieter. Some nodded at me awkwardly. Others couldn't meet my eye. Judy walked past without saying a word. Beth paused, only for a moment, then said in a low voice meant just for me, "You were always good at playing the victim." I smiled, small and steady. "And you were always good at playing family." She flinched, then walked on. "And I didn't just reclaim a house that day. I reclaimed a truth, a voice, and the version of myself that had been buried beneath all their noise." For the first time in weeks, I felt the sun on my face and didn't shrink from it. In the days that followed the video, the house became quiet again, but not in the way it had been after Rick died. This time, it was the quiet of retreat. Not one phone call, not a single text, not even a knock at the door. And yet, I knew they weren't done unraveling. Not really. The first real crack came from the inside. The Connecticut buyer, the one Beth had bragged about during that meeting, pulled out after reading the news article. Ellie's friend had submitted a tip to a local column. "Wife reclaims home after husband's final video shocks family." It was a small piece, nothing scandalous, just a few lines about justice, quiet courage, and a widow standing her ground. But that was enough. Apparently, no investor wanted their Airbnb tied to a viral story about family greed and legal backfiring. Even less when they learned a follow-up video had surfaced. The lawyer's public statement confirming the legitimacy of Rick's will and the video's timing. Beth tried to sue, or at least she threatened to. But it turns out trying to challenge a notarized document, with timestamps, witnesses, and a lawyer's backing, isn't quite as easy when your only rebuttal is, "I thought he said he'd leave it to us." The court rejected her petition before it even reached a hearing. Denise didn't fare much better. She had put down a deposit on a new condo, thinking the sale would go through, thinking she'd use her share for a fresh start in Florida. When her financing fell apart, she tried to get her deposit back. She didn't. That's how I found out she was couch surfing between 2 friends and a niece in Boca Raton. Judy? She never reached out. But I heard through Ellie that she'd quietly stepped down from her HOA position, due to health. Truth was, the neighbors didn't want her leading anything after they found out she tried to remove a widow from her home. That kind of bitterness doesn't fade behind lace curtains. And Beth, the one who called me overattached, she lost her part-time speaking gig. The nonprofit she worked with didn't want the bad press. Apparently, women uplifting women didn't sit well with someone who helped erase a grieving woman from her own husband's grave plaque. Funny how fast the high horses disappear when people finally see who's really been feeding them. I didn't throw them out the way they threw me. I didn't post rants. I didn't retaliate with venom. That's not how you win. I tended the roses in the front yard, the ones I'd nearly given up on. I baked sourdough for Ellie and left a warm loaf on her porch with a handwritten thank you note. I met with Stephen twice to make sure the transition of ownership was complete, official, and irreversible. I asked for nothing more, and still, one by one, they came. Not all of them, just the ones with something left to lose. Denise called first. Her number lit up my phone on a Thursday morning while I was folding laundry. I let it ring, twice, then a third time. Then I picked up. Not to talk, just to listen. Her voice was tight, humbled in a way that didn't feel honest yet. I didn't expect him to really do that, she said. None of us did. It felt like you were just convenient, I asked. Calm, steady. She paused. No, yes, maybe. But I see now. We crossed a line. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I'm not angry anymore, Denise, I said softly. But I'm not coming back to explain myself to people who never tried to understand me in the first place. She was silent after that, and I let her sit in it. Beth came next. Not with a phone call, with a letter. Handwritten. Loopy cursive. 2 pages. No stamp. Left at my doorstep in a white envelope. She started with, I watched the video again, and ended with, I think I hated you because you did the job we couldn't. She said sorry, 4 times, but not once did she ask how I was doing. Not once did she acknowledge that it was never just about the house. It was about being erased. I didn't write her back. Because closure isn't something you owe people when they only start reaching for it after the room's already burned down. And Judy? She came last. Or maybe she just waited the longest. It was a Sunday. I was trimming back the lavender bush near the steps when her car slowed in front of the house. She didn't park, just hovered. Then, the window rolled down. Her white curls glowed in the morning sun. She didn't wave, but she looked. Right at me. And for the first time in 20 years, she looked like someone who knew she had broken something that wouldn't be fixed. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just met her gaze, steady, open, unafraid. She nodded once, like a woman who had nothing left to defend. Then she drove away, and I turned back to my garden, not to win, not to punish, just to grow something that didn't need anyone's permission to bloom. The house is quiet now, but not in a hollow way, the kind of quiet that lingers after healing, after something broken finds its new shape. The lavender I replanted near the porch is blooming again. It took time, more than I thought it would, but it's back. Bold, unbothered, and softer at the edges. Some mornings I sit on the front steps with my coffee and just listen. Birds arguing in the tree, wind brushing the hedges. The creak of the swing Rick built, still moving like he just stepped off it. I don't feel haunted here anymore. Not by grief, not by betrayal, not even by the need to be understood. There's something freeing about no longer waiting to be invited to the table, when you finally realize you were never meant to eat crumbs on the edge of someone else's plate. I started baking again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, for no one but me. One afternoon I made Rick's favorite lemon pound cake, same old recipe, same old chipped glass bowl. But this time I sliced the first piece for myself. Sat at the table with a candle lit beside me, just me and a plate and a moment I didn't have to share to feel whole. Ellie still comes by. She always knocks softly, even though I tell her she doesn't have to. Last week she brought her daughter, a shy little thing with big eyes and mismatched socks. When she asked if she could water the roses, I handed her the tiny blue tin watering can Rick once used as a joke. Only if you promise to talk to them, I said. She nodded, serious as a surgeon. I'll tell them they're doing great. I smiled, because that's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes rebuilding doesn't look like a new job or a new man or a shiny trip to Italy. Sometimes it looks like hearing your own breath again and realizing you've been holding it for years. There's a small apricot tree growing near the back fence now. It wasn't planned. I didn't plant it. It just appeared. Maybe a bird dropped a pit. Maybe it was one of Rick's. He loved apricots, always bought too many and forgot them in coat pockets. The first time I noticed it, it was barely a twig. A stubborn little sprout pushing up through soil no one had touched in months. I almost pulled it. Thought it was a weed. But something told me to wait. Now it stands waist high. Not blooming yet, but strong, alive. I see myself in it. Not the younger me, not the grieving me, the now me, the woman who doesn't apologize for taking up space, who doesn't flinch when people whisper, who knows that surviving is not weakness, it's proof. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been the quiet one in the room, the one who gave and gave, waiting for someone to say, "You belong here." Maybe you never heard it, so let me say it now. You did belong. You do belong. Even if they pretended not to see it, you are not the disposable one. You are not the extra chair. You are not the placeholder. If they took everything and still told you it wasn't enough, they were wrong. You don't need to burn it all down to reclaim your worth. You just have to stop handing them the matches. And if you're still healing, that's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to rebuild by Friday. Sometimes just waking up and making your own cup of coffee is a revolution. Let it be enough. And when the time comes, when that tiny sprout in you begins to push through whatever ground they tried to bury you under, don't be afraid to bloom. Do it loudly. Do it quietly. Do it in your own way. But do it. Because I promise you, there is life on the other side of being cast aside, and it's yours this time. So if this story found you at the right moment, or the hard one, leave me a comment. Tell me what you're planting now, or what you've survived. And if someone you know needs to hear this, send it to them. Let them know the house may be gone, the plaque may be changed, the invitation may never come, but they are still more than what was taken from them. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe. Because here we don't wait to be chosen. We rise together.